Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulihil kareem. Inshallah, today I want to just run through a few basics of the books of Nahw. I'm not going to go through each book individually. I just want to explain four different types of, they're probably more, but from my understanding of what I've studied, four different structures or styles of books in Nahw. Inshallah, if I get a chance, I'll go through each one of them in detail, or just a summary of them in detail. Some of them we've already got videos on explain the book, but just for people who are studying, who want to study Nahw, or who've already studied Nahw and want to improve the Nahw, how do you as a person improve, or how do you study, or how would I recommend, not only way, but how I would recommend or a guideline to studying Nahw. So first of all, if you don't know any Arabic, then you can't start studying an Arabic book because you don't know Arabic. You need to learn Arabic. So for that, then you have books in English, primers in English, which in English or Urdu, which explain teach the Arabic language using the mother tongue, either English or Urdu, etc. And then once that is completed, those primers are completed, you can then go into an Arabic book which teaches Arabic grammar and Nahw in Arabic. So in English, there's a few of them, and they all have there's two basic types. One is those that are grammar heavy. So for example, you have in English, you have Tafsir al-Nahw, for example. That's a translation of the Ilm al-Nahw from Urdu. Again, they all have the pros and its cons. One of the pros that is well structured in terms of grammar, it's got lots of detail. But one of the cons which I personally find is that there's no exercise. There are exercises, but they're very few. So the rules don't usually sit in the person's mind. Secondly, it was written in Urdu originally and then translated. It's originally based on higher books. It's not written for a beginner as such. But again, that's one book that I use. Another book that's quite good is 10 Lessons, which was originally Das Sabak. It has been translated into English, and now it's good. It's very easy in terms of structure. One disadvantage is it has a lot of irrelevant vocabulary. For example, some of the words, they're not as relevant, or they're not as useful for Quran and Hadith. They're more day-to-day based on the author's culture. Another disadvantage of that is that sometimes he has exercises and rule and practice sentences which have not been explained in as much detail as they should have been in the top. Sometimes the rules haven't been explained. But on a whole, it's quite a good, useful book if I get help of a teacher to make your understanding of the Arabic language to a basic foundation where you can actually then go on to the Arabic-based books. So there's two in English which are common. There are probably many others, I'm not aware of them. I don't really use those. I use those who follow my channel know that we make our own books. We have the current series we're doing, First Steps to Understanding Nahw, Level 1, that has the rules and exercises. But again, it's not published yet, but you can use those too, or you can follow the videos. Once you've got to the first level, you've learned enough Arabic to understand Arabic in Arabic. So then now the Arabic books, the main books basically now. So from here, the four different layouts, four different structures. The first is something very common in our Darulums, is the Hidayat al-Nahw Kafiya structure. So basically we have Hidayat al-Nahw as the primary book, which is Hidayat al-Nahw. Then after that you have Kafiya. So Hidayat al-Nahw is basically an abridgment of Kafiya. Well, not abridgment, explanation. It's actually longer than Kafiya. But it's an explanation of Kafiya made simpler. Some places he goes on in unnecessary explanations. For example, beginning he goes on to the discussion of why is a fa'il called a fa'il, why is ism called an ism, tanazul fa'lain. He goes into a very long discussion. But apart from that, on a whole, it's a good book and it gives you a good structure. And the Kafiyas are, say, again, based on the same structure. And then you have the Sharah of Radhi on Kafiya. So these three you can use. And the structure of these books is divided into three main categories of ism, fa'il, and harf. And then under each category, then you have the discussion of the ism, of the fa'il, and the harf. I'm only discussing the main books. Many other books have followed this similar pattern. Allama Zamakhshari's Mufassal is also based on this structure, more or less. And there are also other books based on this structure as well. That's the first one. In the Arab world, what they use another structure, another style. And majority of the modern Arabic books are written on this structure. What they use Ajurumiyya originally, Ajurumiyya. Now, many of our other alums don't use Ajurumiyya because Ajurumiyya is a primer. So basically, the job that would have been done in Tafsir al-Nahw has already been done. So there's no need for Ajurumiyya. That's why some people ask, why don't you do Ajurumiyya? It's because once we've studied Nahw in English, if you study Ajurumiyya and you do a long shara on it, that's fine. But The Matan of Ajurumiyya, all the details have been covered in Tafsir al-Nahwa, or 10 lessons on Nahwa Miras and Nahwa, or the Nahwa books that we have, so you don't really need Ajurumiyya. And then you have Qatr al-Nada. After Qatr al-Nada, you have Awdul Masalik or Alfiyat ibn Malik. So what happens here? In these books, what did he do? The structure is roughly, you have mufradat, so he explains the mufradat, ism, fa'il, harf, definition, the alamatul ism, alamatul fa'il, alamatul harf, a few words of i'rab, ism, so mufradat, he explains the mufradat more or less. Then he goes on to jumla ismiyah. In jumla ismiyah, he explains the jumla ismiyah, the nawasikh, then jumla fa'iliyah, all the parts of jumla fa'iliyah, and then towards the end he has mutafarriqat. So Ajurumiyya has a similar structure, more or less similar structure. Qatr is based on this, which is based on the Alfiyat ibn Malik. Now Alfiyat ibn Malik is an Alfiyah, 1,000 poems. It's good if you can do that book and memorize the poems. I'm not talking about, all the Masalik is like it's high. One of the in Arab world is standard, and it's one of like the final books that they would do before they go on to like more takhassus. So if you can do the Alfiyat ibn Malik, you can. But the thing is, it's all in poetry. And sometimes a lot of time is spent on the poetry, explain the poetry and understand the poetry if you're not familiar with the poetry, as opposed to the Nahw itself. So it depends on if you can memorize it and learn it. It'd be brilliant because you'd have all the rules of Nahw on tip of your tongue. And based on Alfiyat ibn Malik is Ibn Hisham's Awdahul Masalik. Now, this is the same of Alfiyat ibn Malik, but it doesn't have it's not in poetry form. It's in prose, so it's much better. But it's quite detailed. It's got a lot of mustasnayat, etc. If you get any of these three books, if you get Qatr al-Nada, Awdahul Masalik, or Alfiyat ibn Malik, try to get the version. Try and get the version which has Muhyiddin Abdul Hamid's rahimahullah, his hawashi on it, because they're very good hawashi, especially the Awdul Masalik, even Qatr al-Nada and even the Shudhur al-Dhahab. If you get his like hawashi on all of these books, may Allah reward him. If you get these books, try and get the one with his hawashi on it. It's much better. It's almost like a whole book itself. His hawashi almost a shara itself. So these books are based on one structure. Now after that, you have another structure book based on awamil. So Allama Jurjan rahmatullahi alayhi, he's based a lot of his nahwa on this concept of awamil. He's got the mi'atu awamil. Basically, he's codified, he's tried to explain the language on nahwa based on the fact that verbs influences nouns after them, certain nouns influences verbs after nouns after them, the huruf, and how these huruf, etc., how they influence one particle influence another, one word influence another word's i'rab. Now, one thing in our Darulums is that many people, they use Sharh Muta'amil, and they have the concept Sharh Muta'amil teaches tarkib. Sharh Muta'amil is not a book to teach tarkib. Any book, whether it's Sharh Muta'amil, whether it's Bidqi, whether it's Kafiyah, whether it's Qisr Nabiyyin, any book, whether it's the Quran, you can use any book to do the i'rab of it. So Sharh Muta'amil is not primarily meant to teach tarkib or to use it as a book of tarkib. Even in Bidqi, you have something like Zini Zada, rahimullah, he was obsessed with this i'rab. He wrote the i'rab out of the Awamil, because every single word, he got the i'rab of Awamil Bidqi. He's got a book on Kafiyah, written the i'rab of the whole Kafiyah is an i'rab of it. And people have done books. There's also people have done the i'rab of Alfiyat Malik. So doing i'rab and a tahlil nahwi is not confined to Sharh Mi'ati Amil. The book, its primary purpose is to explain nahw in a different way. What particles cause the i'rab. So instead of saying, well, this is jumla ismi, or instead of saying ism fa'il harf, as then in Hidayat Nahwa discussion, or instead of having the mufrada, jumla ismiya, jumla fa'iliya, as in Qatr al-Nada, Masalik, he's saying, well, these are governing particles, these are the governed, etc. Now, Sharh Muta'amil, that was the first book, or basically Jurjani rahimahullah, he started off this system. After that, many people came after him, but one of the most recent, well, relatively recent, was a Turkish scholar, Al-Bidqi or Al-Bidqi. He wrote his awamil. Now his is, I was going to teach Sharh Muta'amil. When I started doing research, I realized awamil Bidqi is better, in my opinion, because is more comprehensive. It is awamil, then it has a ma'mul, and it also has i'rab. It explains the i'rab. And so if someone wants to do this one, I would recommend reading Awamil Bidqi. And Awamil Bidqi, the Musannif rahmatullah, he's got a shara on this book itself, like Izharul Asrar. So it's not only based on, so the shara is not only based on the Awamil concept, it's more on a general rule. So that is quite good. And then the third one is, all three of these books, if you look at them, one of the issues of these three books, all three of these, and not issue of one of them, what I would recommend is try to cover one from each one of these four categories, so that you become well grounded. Because what happens, each of them have its own structure and style. Now, in Bidqi, for example, you do i'rab and ma'mul. But in the technicalities of the huruf, even though in discussing here Nahwa, is not in as much detail. Similarly, the Arab of the Jumal, the whole concept is alien to these three books. Well, it's not alien to the Musannifun, but they never discussed it in their books. So the fourth category of books I would recommend is Ibn Hisham's books, which are basically he wrote, I think he wrote, I'm not sure which I can't remember the order. He wrote Mughni al-Labib. He wrote a book, a massive book. It got lost. Then he wrote Qawaid al-Arab. Then he wrote Mughni al-Labib, or the order all the way around. And then Nuqtul al-Arab. So Nuqtul al-Arab is a very, very brief book. In there he explains the Arab of Jumal, Jumla. He explains the Arab of Shibul Jumla. And he explains and he details some huruf and the way huruf, different ma'ani of the huruf. For example, ma is used in 5 different ways or 6 different ways. Ayun can be used in different ways. So this is a very, very brief book. It's only about maybe 5, 6, maybe 10 pages, and very brief, but very jami, a very good book. We've got a video series on that as well. After that, then more detail is the same structure, Qawaid al-Arab by Ibn Hisham as well, rahimahullah. And there is more detail. It's a good book, and this is a very, very common book in the Arab world. It's got a lot of shuruh, kafiyat, it's got hashi on it, it's got ashara on it. There's quite a few people who've done shuruh on it. So it's a very, very good book, and it's very, very common. It's something that you if you want to do one of each, this is one of the categories that you should go into. And then a very, very detailed is then Mughni al-Labib, which he then goes through the context of Nuqtul al-Arab, Qawaid al-Arab, but it's in much more detail. Now, the reason I would explain the last fourth category, many people are not really, well, from my knowledge, many people are not really into this fourth category, or they haven't. But it's very important because, again, as I mentioned before, it discusses Arab of Jumal, Arab of Shibul Jumal, and it also goes into the ma'ani of the huruf. So yes, even though Hidayat Nahw does have a bit of the ma'ani of the huruf, it doesn't cover in great detail. And for example, like hatta ibtida'iyya is a harfun jar, is some different forms of ma ismiya, ma is a harf when it comes to ism, and all the different meanings and how it comes in the Quran. All these different ways are used. So, but again, the last books don't cover the first part. So what I would recommend, if you've already studied Nahw and you want to improve in Nahw, try to at least do one book in each. If you do Hidayat Nahw, go with Hidayat Nahw again. Qatun Nada has got a similar structure. Qatun Nada and Hidayat Nahw, they overlap quite a bit. There's nothing. So the first two categories, Hidayat Nahw Kafiya and Qatun Nada, Awdul Masalik. Awdul Masalik's got loads of stuff. So if you're going to study that, you're going to have to take a long time to study that. But if you want to reference anything, there's a lot, everything's in there more or less. But Hidayat Nahw and Qatun Nada, they're the similar level. There's not, you get a few masail here and there, which is one is covered in here, more detail, one less detail, a few things here and there. Generally speaking, if you're struggling for time, then you don't have to do both of them. Either one is fine. And doing both of them is not really going to bring much benefit, additional benefit. So one of those two from each of those categories. And then the other category, the Awamil, Birqi is a really good option. And you can get the Sharaf Izhar al-Asrar printed by Darul Minhaj, very good print, very well laid out, easy to use. And then from the latter category, Nuqtul al-Arab is very brief. And then Qawaid al-Arab is a bit more detailed and needs a bit more of a challenge. But if you do all four of these, then you have a very good, inshallah, very good foundation in the Arabic language. So after doing a primer in English or Urdu or whatever your mother tongue is, after you've done that, try to do one book at least from each of these four categories. And if you got a choice, the first two categories, Hidayat Nahw Kafiya, Ajurumi Yaqtun Nada, Awdul Masalik, one is enough. But they're all different levels. So either Hidayat Nahw or Qatun Nada. And if you want more detail, proper detail, Awdul Masalik. And I've only gone through the main books like that are studied as a Durusi books and as part of the syllabus is in places. Apart from that, many other books, inshallah, if I get a chance, I will go through a brief summary or the main points of these, inshallah. Okay, that's about it, inshallah. Subhanallah, bihamdi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta wa nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.